waiting on the Restream server to sync up, and it appears to be that way. Our bumper's running, we're recording, our chat room's waiting, our guest is waiting. So let's count it down to Studio 9. Studio 9 here at pjnet.tv. Welcome. And come on in. Make yourself comfortable. Put yourself on the big screen one night. Why about that? Folks, we are going to have a good time tonight. I hope that you are prepared spiritually to be uplifted and edified. And we'll probably have some fun too, because our guest tonight, a very special friend of pjnet.tv. I must confess, and I want to do this publicly, Ron, because I've already shared it with you, but I messed up last week. And it normally happens when I try to get involved in meddling in Barbara's work. And it's not the first time it's ever happened, but we had a vacancy, and I scrambled and contacted you. You graciously said, "Oh, I'll be glad to do that." So I notified Barbara right away, and she said, "Oh, we've already got somebody." And I thought, okay, what was that, about 11 o'clock at night, something like that? And so Ron graciously said, no problem. And so he is here tonight. I felt bad asking you to come on because it's like, well, I preceded it saying, did you notice? I've already checked this with Barbara. We are clear tonight. If you
noticed that.
No more false alarms, no more sky is falling. And but thanks for coming in, Ron. And I see your beautiful home there in the background. I love that fireplace, and just the it looks very peaceful. How is the state of Tennessee working out for you?
Well, it's a little bit stormy down here. It's kind of crazy with the weather. We get a lot of pop-up thunderstorms, and since our kids have been living down here, or at least a couple of them, for I guess 7 or 8 years now, and so we've been back and forth positions, so we kind of feel a little bit acclimated. But we've got a lot of people moving in from other states, California, Illinois, and they come here in Middle Tennessee. They're not used to stuff we're not as used to. But our son was showing me a picture of some people that came in here from California, and there was may have been a tornado watch, which is a little less threatening than a warning or whatever. Got a lot of tornado watches, but at this point it was only a bad thunderstorm. So this woman posted a picture of her and her family sitting in a bathtub with bike helmets on, waiting for the thunderstorm to come through. So we're not quite that bad yet, but it is rather stormy pretty frequently down here. A lot of rain lately and stuff. But other than that, we're doing okay. We're getting acclimated. My wonderful wife Diane's turned this box we bought into a home, and so she's got good taste in everything but men. Well, and other than this, that's okay.
Well, what you could do, Ron, is build one of those storm shelters. But I guess to do that, you'd have to have a backhoe come out there and pour concrete and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. If we had, we bought the house, it was still under construction, it was all under roof and framed out and everything. So it was a little bit beyond the point where we could have put a storm shelter in easily. If we'd gotten to it earlier, I would have done that.
Well, Ron,
but our son lives like 10 minutes away, and he's got a great storm shelter. He's got a basement you can get in, and you could live in there for probably 2 years.
Well, let me try it again. You could build a driveway, but to do that, you'd have to pour some concrete and form it up. I'm trying to tee it up for you, Ron. Pouring concrete.
You did.
Okay. I am so trying, man. I work hard here.
Have you ever poured concrete?
Yes.
Have you ever poured concrete?
Yes.
It's fun, isn't it?
It's work.
Well,
it's not something, hey, Ron, let's go have some fun next weekend. Let's go pour some concrete. What do you think?
Amen.
I mean, why should we go fishing when we could pour concrete, Well,
we're across from our house. There's kind of a circle, and there's a couple of houses that are way up on a hill. And they're putting in, or were, two of the longest driveways we've seen anywhere in this area since we came here. One of them on the right side has 3 sharp turns in the driveway going all the way up to the house. And I don't even know how many feet it is. Things like close to a quarter mile long altogether. And they were pouring concrete. And so because we don't have a lot to do, it's entertaining watching construction. But it's fascinating to me how many ways God reveals little things about that are principles and concepts and ideas in ordinary, everyday kind of stuff. Have you noticed that?
Well, it is, Ron, but I'll be honest with you. I'm really stretching my imagination to see or imagine what God would say.
Well, I'll tell you. You're not surprised, are you? They were fighting the hardening of the concrete because, it does get hard, obviously. And the hotter it is and the drier it is and the sunnier it is, the faster the concrete sets up. Mm-hmm. So we had a bunch of guys out here with a pumper truck, longest boom I've ever seen on a pumper truck, pumping that concrete down here to where the road was from up on the hill. And there was at one point like 12 guys out there working, trying to stay ahead of the concrete hardening up before it got too difficult to work with. And there's a passage of scripture, and I'm going to read it because it's fascinating. Because concrete isn't the only thing that hardens up. Now it's in its nature to harden up. It's supposed to. It's what it does. It's built into it. So concrete doesn't harden. It's its problem. But anyway, there's a passage in Hebrews, and I'm going to read it because I didn't memorize it. But there's a warning in here that I think is kind of valid for us today. Beware, brethren. And God's serious when he starts off a statement like that. Not that he isn't always, but beware, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief. I'm sorry, I get ahead of myself. Let me do that again. Beware, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God, but exhort one another daily while it's called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Go say that again. Beware, blah, blah, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God, lest any of you, that's a pretty broad audience, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. And so I thought, that's a fascinating idea. People harden up too. People get impossible, difficult to work with too. One of the things that we mentioned a minute ago that caused the guys to be concerned and to try to work faster was because of the atmosphere that was kind of their enemy on that particular day, because it was speeding up the hardening process, and they were trying to stay ahead of it because it was going to get to a point where you couldn't work with it anymore. I don't know if you've ever in your concrete work had to struggle against that kind of thing or not.
But I did find out some interesting facts about, and I'm not a tradesman. I'm not part of the Concrete Pourers Union. But if you have a slope, like I can imagine in Tennessee, when you put that concrete there, you have to smooth it out and float it and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
You have to work that concrete from the lower elevation to the higher elevation. If you work it from the higher to the lower, you'll just pull all the concrete down with you. The other thing that amazed me, I learned this in Barbados on a mission trip. You can take concrete and pour it in the water, and it'll still harden.
Eventually it will.
It takes longer, but it will. It's not a drying out process. It's a chemical reaction. When the ingredients get wet, it sets up a chemical reaction. And a lot of people, by the way, especially down here in the South, call it cement. Folks, cement is one of the ingredients in concrete. It's concrete. Not cement. Remember the cement pond on the Beverly Hillbillies?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
All right, I took you right off the rails.
Well, that's all right. I talk too much. I mentioned that in my post for this week. I learned that I belong to the fraternity of guys that never know when to put a sock in it. But my daughter actually taught me that earlier on. She recognized it right off because she had done something. I can't remember what she did, Coach. She broke some rule, violated some boundary or whatever. And I was going to do my correcting thing. She's about 5. And so I sat her down and I was doing my introduction to her consequences and all that. And I'm going through all this intricate list of details about why what she did was wrong and what the rationale was behind that being a rule and all this kind of stuff. And I was just going on. I tell you what, I was in my element, going through all that stuff. And she kind of held her little hand up like this. And I said, what? And she kind of rolled her eyes up to one side and said, after taking a deep breath, Dad, couldn't you just beat me or something?
So, you were tormenting her, Ron. You were
obviously so. Previews of coming attractions. But anyway, concrete, cement hardens. It's a process. It's not immediate. It's not immediate. It might be speeded up to some degree or whatever, but it's a process. And in thinking about the passage of scripture that God gave us, and when he says, beware, get on your head on a swivel, whatever. Beware lest you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. And it fascinates me how the process goes on and people are not aware that it's going on. Mm-hmm. I've seen people over the years, probably you have too, that at one point they were in church every Sunday, they were like the pillars or whatever, and then something begins to get in the way, and they miss a while, and they fall out of the loop and all that kind of stuff, and they just seem to drift farther and farther away. And
I was waiting for the chance to say this. I'm going to interrupt you. This is too good. I didn't know you were going to say that, but I saw a post today or yesterday. The more you miss church, the less you miss church.
No doubt about that. This COVID season has really had that kind of impact in a lot of places across the nation. And not very many churches have grown in the midst of this pandemic, that's for sure. But some have, and then some ministries are thriving. The one we're involved with down here isn't, but it's an anomaly. But in any case,
it's a process. I'll get you back on.
There are people who, and unfortunately, one of my grandsons is that way. He was brought up in church, initially in Christian school, then got transferred to public school, got involved with some other elements and that sort of thing. And later on, he's involved with things that are unethical, illegal, immoral, all that kind of stuff. And then he's questioning whether the Bible is the word of God at all anymore, and that kind of stuff. You move in gradual increments from a point where you are in alignment with God to a point where you are standing in opposition to him. That's kind of a frightening place to be. But what happens on an individual basis also happens in collective groups. It happens in churches. It happens with nations. When you go back through the Old Testament and you look at God's, from God's perspective at his people, and again and again and again, you see the same thing. Did you find it frustrating when you first came to Christ? You're reading what happened to them after the Exodus, and they're out here, and it's no time. They want to go back to Egypt, and it's like, what is wrong with you people? Have you no sense at all? Are you all progenitors of Democrats? What is it? But totally insane things, and falling down to worship something you carved with your own hands and that kind of stuff. And it was exasperating to see the tendency, and it's not just in the Exodus, but later on in the chaotic kingdom, one good king does something great, have a revival, then here comes another one that has everybody worshiping idols again, and that kind of stuff. Those are the things that burdened me when I thought about this concept about people being hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Sin is a liar. Sin can never deliver what it promises. I've been saying that for I don't know how long. Sin can never deliver what it promises. It's a lie, start to finish, front to back, through and through. And so, but learning that is not an immediate thing. People don't violate a boundary of God and usually and instantly they're turned against God altogether. But one violation opens the doorway to another violation, and that to another one. Then your conscience starts acting up, and you got a couple of choices. You can either repent, come back to God, or you can start justifying, rationalizing what you're doing. And so, well, everybody does it. So how wrong could it be? I'm not hurting anybody else, and this is not what's the big deal here? Just because God said so, does that mean that? And besides, that was a long time ago, and all that kind of stuff. So you begin to rationalize, and you begin to think, oh well, okay, I'm okay. I'm not any worse than the rest of them. And you know how those rationalizations go. And we have seen in our culture this hardening that's been going on for generation after generation after generation. Gradual stuff, things that were sin and people didn't do it. It was morally unacceptable, socially unacceptable, and now worse than that is just normal. Perversions are normal. Murder of innocent babies is normal. Making every kind of freak and weirdo that ever crawled out from under a rock some kind of icon to be worshipped is okay. It's normal. And so that bothered me a lot. But the thing that I wanted to get to is God's counteractive thing. He said, okay, you're in danger. You're vulnerable. You can get hardened through this deceitfulness of sin. But you've got to counteract it. How do you do that? Pass more laws. No, that's not what he said. Elect better people. That's not what he said. Take a course and get certified somehow. That's not what he said. But he said, exhorting one another daily. And that whole exhorting thing. You ever been exhorted, Coach?
Not that I know of, nor or probably in the sense that you're meaning, but yeah, I've been criticized. I've been called into account. Yeah,
it's a process. I've looked back over my life, and then there's some people that have made a special point. Now, exhortation is a little different from just offering a suggestion, and I've had lots of suggestions offered to me. Some of them. Well, we'll get into what some of them are, but I've had a lot of suggestions offered to me. And it's more than the encouragement to consider an alternative set of options and that sort of thing. Exhortation is more than that. It's deeper than that. It's more personal than that. It's more directive than that. It's more, it has a greater degree of possibility that it may cost you something than the others. Exhortation is a deeply personal, spiritual, emotional kind of thing that you have. Like when you see somebody that's involved in something that you know is toxic, it's gonna have spiritual consequences or other consequences. It's easy for us to talk about them, and this is old stuff. This is Baptist boilerplate. It's easy to talk about them and say, we need to pray for Bertha because, she's just in this hellish kind of thing going on. And that's not an exhortation to Bertha. But it's easy to do. It doesn't cost you a lot. And you get a lot of, oh my, I'm so glad you told me that because I can pray for her now and I can tell all my friends or whatever. But God said that everybody is in danger of this gradual, unsensitized, insensitive thing. Ease into it, you don't really realize it. Kind of like getting older. I don't know when I got old, Coach. I think it was probably last Thursday, but I don't know. No, it hit me one time that something wasn't right. And my initial reaction was something's wrong with these brand X piece of junk mirrors we got in the house because they ain't giving the right, feedback. And so I thought, well, we need to replace the mirrors because they're failing on the job. So you don't feel yourself getting older initially. Now, it hits you later on that you are when you can't do junk you used to be able to do, like get on your knees and do concrete. But anyway, the hardening process is gradual. You don't feel it. And there's a counteractive thing that's purposeful that God calls us to do. Exhort one another daily. Why it's called today. Now that's, did you really have to say that, Lord? It's his way of saying, don't put this off. Don't table this to one of those neat little spiritual things you're going to write a devotional about at some point. This is a thing that is so vital to me, that's so necessary to the spiritual health and well-being of my people. I want you doing it every day. Every day.
Daily.
Yeah. And you start thinking, oh, what? That's, do I run around town looking for a drunk so I can admonish them and exhort them not to be drunks? Do you hang out with places where, what do you do? And one of the things that I want to focus on for this week's piece is that there's a way of exhorting other people that is awesomely powerful, that every believer can do, ought to do, that undergirds every other. There are lots of ways, lots of things you can exhort people about. For instance, Paul is exhorting servants to be obedient to their masters. He's exhorting leaders to be aware of who their followers are and not to put people above other people. There's all kinds of exhortations that are possible potentially to do. Exhorting people to avoid particular sins, exhorting people to keep their mouth clean, exhorting people, and on and on and on. But there's one method of exhortation that undergirds every other one. And it's the one that Paul used again and again. He involved himself in all kinds of exhortations. He was constantly exhorting everybody to do all kinds of stuff. But there's one thing that gave every other exhortation he had power. And that was, he said, did you notice how I lived when I was with you? Did you notice that I did all the stuff that I talked about? Did you notice how unblameably I lived among you? Did you notice I didn't take any of your money fraudulently? Did you notice that I carried myself exactly the way I was encouraging you to do? He exhorted by example. And I think, Coach, that example is the strongest exhortation we can have to the veracity, number one, of our stated faith, and number two, of the fact that God's principles work. They're pragmatic. Your life gets better. Sin never makes anything in your life better. Sin doesn't make you a better man. And by the way, neither does money. I had a fellow one time that came into some unexpected money, a considerable amount. And he said this to me. He said, you know what? It didn't make me a better person. Interesting, isn't it, Coach?
For him to observe that about himself?
Yeah.
That's very profound.
He said it did not make me a better person. He also said it did not make me a better servant of God either. It did not improve any of the most valuable, important things in my life. None of them. Got a lot of extra doodads and gadgets I can buy, but it doesn't make me better. Living out God's principles not only makes us better, but it makes an exhortation visible everywhere we go. We become exhorters daily, by how we live, what we do. And I can tell you what, if you're going off for a cocktail every day at noon or whatever drinkers do, I'm a teetotaler, so I don't know what drinkers do. I can't even remember. But if you're doing that, you're not likely to admonish somebody else not to drink. One of the stupidest things my stepdad ever did was sit there with a glass of gin in one hand and lecture me, and a cigarette in the other, and lecture me about smoking and drinking. I mean, I'm not kidding about that. He sat there at the kitchen table, tell me what an awful thing that was to do. And I thought, you and my Uncle Bill, I can't hardly stand be around you as you're drinking, but when you're drinking, you're kind of fun. But he didn't give me the exhortation that mattered. Not until after finally he got saved, turned his life around, and gave up all that stuff and became a powerful witness for Jesus Christ. But the thing that made him a powerful witness for Jesus Christ was that he lived out what he claimed to believe at that point. Mm-hmm. God says that exhortation, if we all involved ourselves in doing that, because Coach, that one of the constant criticisms about Christianity today is the hypocrites in the church, isn't it?
Yeah.
That hasn't changed. Mm-hmm. And everybody's, listen, the woke culture and the cancel culture are not the only ones with a finger to point when somebody messes up. There's plenty of Baptist fingers pointing at one another for the hypocrisy in the church. And all of us are aware of that kind of stuff. But I think it's a simple thing. And some of the most awesomely powerful things God ever reveals to us to do are not complicated. We don't need some kind of academic credential to figure out, do what you say, live what you believe, and make it visible and audible. Clean the filth out of your mouth. Stop hanging out with in places where no good ever comes. And if you're in the bar and you're not in there to witness, you'll not be there, in my opinion. But anyway, that's kind of where my head's been like, figuring out, and exhortations are powerful when you add to your testimony. Because I've been around people a lot in counseling and stuff that are involved in things that are making them completely miserable. And there are very few people that ever come to them and say, hey, this is what God said. Let me help you through that. Let me get with you. Let me get under that burden with you. Let me pray with you and walk with you and being your accountability person or whatever. Let me help you towards something better. And so God's word about the danger of being hardened is to exhort one another daily while it's called today. Don't wait till tomorrow to decide to do that. So,
and make it an act of love. Okay,
absolutely.
it's not an opportunity to be self-righteous. It's not an opportunity to be critical, but it's an opportunity to help a brother or sister in their walk with Christ. And so often, our exhortations fall short of that standard. But Ron, I appreciate your message. I always do. And Ron, you are very gifted, and we just enjoy having you hang out with us, and we appreciate you being here. And our time is up. And folks, I put his website up there, gallagherspen.com. If you like that, go get some more of it. It's there for you. Appreciate you, Ron.
Thank you, Coach. Appreciate
All right. Love it. Okay. Folks, what you see right there is the view. I believe that camera is frozen up. Yes, indeed it is. And it has been for some time, apparently. So how about that? Yeah. All right. Well, now it's working. I gave it a good swift kick. And folks, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. What a champion for the cause of Christ. Well, folks, it's not over. That's just the beginning, because in just a few minutes, just a minute, J.D. Winninger will be here. Before he gets here, think of these two questions. Number one, what is the boldest thing you've ever done for Jesus Christ? And number two, when was it? And I certainly hope that we won't be satisfied with either answer.